Hi, my name is Luna. And if you asked anyone in my family who keeps the wheels turning, who remembers birthdays, who books the Airbnbs for Christmas, or who makes the emergency Costco run before a family barbecue, they'd say my name before you even finish the sentence. I'm 30 years old, a creative director for a fast-paced ad agency in Seattle. And, according to my mom, the one with the plans, the one who gets things done, the dependable one, the problem solver and Clade, the oldest child, and for a long time, I took pride in that. I liked being the rock, the glue, the one everyone leaned on, until one ordinary weekend in May, when I flew home to Santa Rosa, California, to surprise my younger sister Emily, and everything I thought I knew about my role in our family cracked wide open. But before we get there, let me take you back a bit. I grew up in a small Mediterranean-style house, nestled between vineyards and redwoods in Northern California. Santa Rosa is the kind of town where neighbors still wave. The farmers' market happens every Saturday without fail. And you can tell what season it is based on whether people are wearing Patagonia vests or flannel. My parents Patricia and Donald Harris raised me. My sister Emily. And my brother Jake in that house? We were, by all outward appearances, the picture-perfect family. Our fridge was plastered with school art projects and dentist appointment reminder cards. There was a giant wall calendar in the kitchen where every soccer practice, ballet recital, and science fair was color-coded. Mom ran the house like a well-oiled machine, and I was her self-appointed assistant manager. As the eldest, I walked early, read early, and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in visual communications from UCLA. My parents never had to worry about me. I stayed on top of everything my own life, and often theirs too. And when I landed my dream job at a top agency in Seattle, my dad raised his glass and toasted to Luna, our North Star. Emily, on the other hand, was always the wildflower. 5 years younger than me? She colored outside the lines, literally. While I was organizing my high school yearbook layouts, Emily was painting abstract faces on the garage door in Crayola red. She studied illustration and creative writing at the California College of the Arts. My parents supported her. Of course, but cautiously. It's a tough field. Dad would say, "Does she have a backup plan?" Mom would just hum in response. Still, Emily was radiant in her own way. Artsy. Ethereal. The kind of person who makes homemade birthday cards with pressed lavender and quotes from obscure poets. I adored her. I really did. But deep down, I sometimes wondered if I was doing enough to help her make it in the real world. And maybe without realizing it, I treated her more like a project than a person. Fast forward to early May. Emily was graduating with her BFA from CCA. And I was thrilled. I bought her a custom sketchbook from a boutique in Seattle and requested Friday off from work so I could help with her party. I'd even created a Pinterest board with ideas, fairy lights, a congrats grad banner in sage green, her favorite color, and cupcakes decorated like paint palettes. Then came the call. It was Tuesday evening. I was wrapping up a strategy meeting when Mom rang. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, her voice unusually tight. "We've had to postpone Emily's party. Poor thing caught a nasty flu fever. Chills. The whole bit. We're just going to push it out a week or two." "Oh no, is she okay?" I asked, already mentally preparing a care package. "She's resting. Nothing serious. You don't need to come down. Honey, we've got it covered." The marketer in me noticed it, the subtle shift in tone. The way her voice didn't quite match the words, but the daughter in me didn't want to press. So I nodded. Agreed. And spent the next day making chicken risotto with fresh basil and lemon zest, Emily's favorite comfort food. Thursday evening. I booked a flight anyway. I figured, if she's sick, what better surprise than her big sister showing up with her favorite dish and a warm blanket? It had been nearly 6 weeks since my last visit, longer than usual. Work had been intense, and my monthly trips home had slipped into something more seasonal. But this felt like the right moment to show up. I didn't text. I didn't call. I wanted it to be a real surprise. So, Saturday morning, I rented a car from SFO, packed my risotto into a cooler bag, and drove the familiar 2 hours up Highway 101. I remember the sun was high, the sky impossibly blue, the vineyards were green with spring, wildflowers blooming along the edges of the road. Everything felt right, like I was doing the big sister thing, like I was returning to my role in the family where I belonged. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that I wasn't coming home to a sick sister in bed. I was coming home to a celebration in full swing. The moment I turned onto my childhood street in Santa Rosa, I knew something was off. At first, it was subtle. A flash of color. Movement. The faint thrum of laughter carried on the breeze. Then I noticed the cars, lots of them, parked along both curbs like it was a block party. My cousin Ivy's Prius, Uncle Ted's old blue Ford, a couple of neighbors I hadn't seen in years, and tied to the mailbox in front of our house, a cluster of white and crimson balloons, Emily's college colors. I slowed the car, my mind scrambling for explanations. Maybe Mom didn't cancel the party after all. Maybe they rescheduled last minute and forgot to tell me. No, that didn't make sense. The decorations were too deliberate, too polished. The kind you put up after days of planning. Not ours. My risotto sat in the passenger seat beside me, still warm in its cooler bag. Suddenly feeling absurdly out of place, I parked half a block away and just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel. My pulse thudded in my ears. I could hear music now, Fleetwood Mac. Thinking of all things floating from the backyard. Their usual party playlist. The same one we used at every graduation. Every anniversary. Every birthday. I danced to it on the patio more times than I could count. My first instinct was to call Mom again. Ask what the hell was going on? But I didn't. Instead, I opened the door, stepped out, and walked. Each step toward the house felt heavier than the last. My sneakers crunched on the gravel. And with every crunch, I hoped this was all a misunderstanding. A weird, innocent mistake. I mean, they wouldn't really throw the party without me. Right. But as I reached the front steps and peeked through the bay window, the truth slammed into me like a truck. There she was, Emily, glowing in the late afternoon light. Wearing a white sundress and a floral crown, she stood near the kitchen island, accepting a beautifully wrapped gift from Aunt Laurel. My mom bustled around the dining room, arranging canapes on a 3-tiered tray like she hadn't just told me the party was postponed. My dad, with a beer in hand, leaned in close to a group of uncles, laughing like everything was perfectly normal. I stood frozen on the porch, one hand still clutching the handle of the cooler bag. They were all there. Every cousin, every family friend, every neighbor, except me. No one noticed me right away. I opened the front door slowly, the sound of the hinges drowned out by Stevie Nicks' voice floating in from the speakers. I stepped inside. The smell of rosemary and baked brie hit me like a memory. The banner draped across the living room archway read, "Congratulations, Emily, class of 2025. The walls were covered in photos, Emily, as a toddler in a princess dress. Emily in middle school with paint on her cheeks. Emily posing in front of her college campus. A cake sat on the counter. Expertly piped in red and white icing. We're so proud of you. It was the exact kind of celebration we'd thrown for me when I graduated from UCLA. But this time, it was built on a lie. A lie told to exclude me. The first person to see me was my cousin Tyler. He did a double take. Mid-sip of his soda. His mouth pausing halfway to the straw. His eyes widened. And his gaze darted to my mom. A chain reaction followed, heads turning. Smiles faltering. Conversations fading into awkward silence. Mom looked up. Her face went pale. Luna, she said. Too loudly. Like she was trying to sound excited, but had been caught in the act. Oh my goodness. What are you doing here? The room was dead silent. I could hear the ice cubes melting in someone's glass. I brought risotto, I said, lifting the cooler slightly like a peace offering. For Emily. Since she's sick. Emily froze, holding a paper plate stacked with fruit and crackers. Her cheeks flushed red. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Dad took a long sip of his beer and turned away, like maybe this moment wouldn't exist if he didn't look at it directly. Oh, honey, Mom said, walking toward me with outstretched arms. There was a change of plans. Emily started feeling better this morning. And, well, everyone was already planning to come. I got no missed calls. I said, my voice low and razor sharp. No texts. You told me it was canceled. It was just one of those spontaneous decisions, she insisted, her voice shrinking with each word. Aunt Laurel looked uncomfortable. Uncle Ted wouldn't meet my eyes. My sister finally stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think you'd come, Emily said. You're always so busy. My chest tightened. My brain struggled to keep up. Somewhere behind me, the music had stopped. Busy. I repeated. I made risotto. I booked a flight. I showed up. No one said anything. No one had to. The truth was already out in the open. Uninvited and impossible to ignore. Just like me. Without a word, I turned and placed the cooler on the entryway table. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to stay composed. I'm going to use the bathroom, I said quietly. As I walked down the hall, the sea of familiar faces parted awkwardly. Some nodded at me. Others looked away. The smell of lemon candles and roast chicken filled the air. My childhood home felt like a stranger's house dressed in familiar clothes. I locked the door behind me and pressed my hands against the bathroom sink. The face in the mirror was mine. But the look in her eyes, I didn't recognize that. I stood in the bathroom, palms pressed flat on the cool marble countertop, the overhead light casting a yellow hue across my face. I looked composed on the outside, but inside I was unraveling. Rm. This wasn't just about a party. This was about being erased from the narrative of my own family. I splashed cold water on my face, hoping to shock myself back into clarity. But all I felt was numb. The silence outside the door buzzed with what I imagined were whispered conversations. Were they talking about me? Were they regretting being caught, or were they just annoyed that I'd shown up and disrupted their carefully curated day? Then my phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from my younger brother, Jake, who was still at college in Arizona. It read, heard about the party. Are you okay? That was when it hit me. Jake knew. He knew the party was happening. So how far did this go? Who else knew? Was I the only one left out, driven by something between panic and fury? I opened my Instagram app. The first story I saw was from my cousin Ivy, boomerangs of her and Emily clinking glasses in the backyard. both smiling like they had nothing to hide. Then one from Aunt Laurel. Captioned, "So proud of you. M," with a photo of the decorations I'd helped plan via a now pointless Pinterest board. But it was a story from Emily herself that shattered me. A video from last night, a dinner at our parents' house. Cake already made. Everyone laughing and singing as they pre-celebrated her graduation. Last night, while I'd been at my apartment in Seattle, carefully packing a cooler full of homemade risotto and researching the best card to write something meaningful, my family had been partying. Without me. That's when I saw a notification from iMessage. It was from Emily? Except, it wasn't meant for me. Is Luna still in the bathroom? What do we do now? She had accidentally sent it to me instead of their group chat. My blood went cold. I scrolled up. Nothing. No thread. No chat labeled Harris family or anything remotely close. That group didn't include me. My hands were shaking now. On a hunch, I pulled open the top drawer where Mom usually left her phone charging when she cooked. There it was, screen locked. Sitting next to some vanilla-scented lotion and a half-used lip balm. I stared at it. I shouldn't. I knew I shouldn't. But I did. The passcode hadn't changed since high school 1986, the year my parents got married. I tapped it in. The screen opened. I found the group chat within seconds. Harris fam Tedia. Every name was there, Mom. Dad. Emily. Jake. Aunt Laurel. Even Cousin Ivy. Except mine. I scrolled up. Heart thudding. As if each message was a match thrown into a gasoline-soaked room. 2 weeks ago, Mom reminder. As far as Luna knows, the party is postponed because of Emily's flu. Dad, I still feel weird about lying to her. Emily, can we not do this again? I just want one celebration where I don't feel judged. Aunt Laurel Patricia. Maybe it's time to talk to her instead of hiding from it. Mom, she'll overanalyze every word. It's easier this way. Luna's always busy with work anyway. She probably won't mind. Jake. Are we doing the group gift still, Emily? Yeah. Everyone but Luna. She'll want to buy her own thing and overdo it like always. I dropped the phone back into the drawer like it had burned me. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the closed toilet lid, staring at the tile floor, trying to make sense of what I'd just read. Every word stabbed deeper than the last. It wasn't just one person. It wasn't just a moment. This had been coordinated, discussed, rationalized. They had decided I was too much, too opinionated, too intense, too everything. And instead of talking to me, asking me to pull back, to listen more, to ease up, they created a version of family that didn't include me. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always arrive like a bomb. Sometimes it comes in whispers and passive texts. In well-intentioned group chats that don't have your name on them. In red velvet cakes cut without you. A soft knock broke the silence. Luna, my mom's voice. Are you okay? Sweetheart, I opened the door. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just held up her phone. The screen still glowing. The group chat still open. Her face crumpled instantly. You weren't supposed to see that. She whispered. Clearly. I replied, somehow managing to keep my voice steady. Luna. Wait, let me explain why, I asked. Why did you do this? She didn't answer. Instead, she led me across the hall into her bedroom, and away from the murmuring guests and the clinking glasses. We sat on the edge of her neatly made bed, surrounded by family photos I suddenly didn't recognize. She took a deep breath. Emily asked if for just once we could have a celebration without everything becoming about you. I blinked. About me. You have to understand. Luna, when you walk into a room, You take up all the air. You're so capable. So prepared. So confident. And I love that about you. We all do. But sometimes, your sister, your brother, they just want to feel seen for who they are. Not in comparison to you. I never meant to overshadow anyone. I said softly. I know. She whispered. But that's what makes it complicated. You don't even realize you're doing it? The bedroom door creaked open again. My dad stepped in, rubbing the back of his neck like he was carrying the weight of the whole conversation. I wanted to tell you the truth. He said, I almost did. But you didn't. I replied, my voice sharper this time. No? He admitted. I didn't. I stood slowly, setting the phone down on the nightstand. So instead of talking to me, you talked about me? You lied. All of you. Neither of them argued. And somehow, that hurt more than if they had. I didn't remember walking out of the house. I only remembered the sound of gravel crunching beneath my shoes, the soft thud of my cooler bag swinging at my side, and the weight of 30 pairs of eyes pretending not to look at me as I passed through them. No one stopped me. Not Emily. Not Mom. Not even Dad. Someone, maybe Aunt Laurel, called out, Luna. Wait. But it was too late. I kept walking. I didn't trust my voice to respond. I didn't trust myself not to explode in a way I'd regret. I opened the car door, tossed the risotto cooler onto the passenger seat like it had betrayed me too, and slid into the driver's seat. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they turned pale. My chest rose and fell in short, sharp bursts. And then, finally, I cried. Not polite tears. Not the kind you dab at with a napkin. I'm talking about the kind of crying that feels like it comes from your bones. The kind that curls you inward. I cried for being excluded. I cried for not seeing it coming. I cried for every family group chat I wasn't in. Is every moment they laughed together without me. Every secret plan made while I was out earning degrees and job titles. I cried because I thought I was the glue. And I had just realized I was the tape. They quietly peeled off and discarded. When I could finally see again, I didn't drive back to the hotel. I didn't go to a friend's house. I didn't even open Google Maps. My car just moved, like it remembered something I hadn't consciously chosen. 15 minutes later, I found myself pulling into the dirt parking lot at Foothill Regional Park, where my family used to go for weekend hikes and 4th of July picnics. The air smelled like eucalyptus and pine. The sun had begun to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the worn walking trails. I sat on a bench overlooking the duck pond, the same bench where, 15 years ago, I had once explained to Emily the phases of the moon using Oreo cookies. Back then, she had looked at me like I held the answers to the universe. Now I wasn't even worth an invitation to her party. My phone buzzed on the seat next to me. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. I finally glanced down. 7 missed calls. 12 unread messages. A new one popped up on the screen. Mom, we're worried. Please text me so I know you're safe. Safe, what an ironic word for someone who had just been emotionally gutted by the people who were supposed to be her safe place. Another text buzzed in. This time, from Jake. I didn't know they were doing that. I swear. Mom told me you had a big pitch at work and couldn't make it. I stared at the screen. Then, finally, I typed. They created a whole group chat without me. Jake. For months, you were in it. Everyone was. Except me. He replied almost instantly, wait. What? I thought you just weren't interested. I figured you were too busy. No one told me you weren't in the loop. That's so messed up. He hesitated, then added, They lied. They planned the lie. To protect Emily. From me. Another pause. Then, that's not okay. I had no idea. But, can I ask you something? Can you see even a little bit why Emily might feel the way she does? The question stung. And yet, I didn't ignore it. I let the silence stretch out as I stared at the surface of the pond. Watching a family of ducks glide in a perfect V, I thought about the way I showed love practical, efficient. No nonsense. I thought about how I always tried to fix things, to optimize every moment, every event, every person. Did I give unsolicited advice too often? Probably. Did I critique without realizing? Almost certainly. Did I cast a long shadow, God? Maybe. I picked up my phone and called Jake. He answered on the first ring. Luna, yeah. I'm okay. I said, sort of. He sighed in relief. Where are you? At Foothill Park. Just thinking. Another pause. Listen. He said. What they did was wrong. But you know you're kind of intense. Right, like, you mean well? But not everyone wants a PowerPoint presentation on how to live their life. I gave a dry laugh. That obvious. Huh, only since you were, like, 12. We talked for another 20 minutes about how things had gotten to this point, about Emily, about Mom and Dad, about how none of them ever told me how they really felt, about how maybe I never gave them the space to. After we hung up, I just sat there, breathing. That's when Kira, my best friend from college, called. I saw your texts. She said without preamble. What happened? I told her everything. Every bitter, humiliating detail. She listened without interrupting like she always did, and when I finished, she exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. Okay, she said. Now, I'm going to ask you something you might not like. Go for it. Have you ever considered that the way you love people might be exhausting? I blinked. Wow. I'm serious. Lou, you do love hard. But sometimes, people don't want fixing. They want company. You show love, like a manager shows KPIs. You're thoughtful. Yes, but controlling too. Her words weren't cruel. They were honest. And that made them harder to reject. I leaned back on the bench and stared up at the darkening sky. I don't want to lose them. I whispered. Then don't? Kira said. But don't go back there demanding apologies either. Go back as a human. Not a hurricane. I closed my eyes. Maybe it wasn't about forcing them to see me. Maybe it was about learning to see them without judgment. Without improvement plans. Without performance metrics. Maybe it was time to take the cape off. Not because I wasn't strong, but because I was tired of being the hero in a story no one asked me to save. 2 days passed. 2 days of silence. No texts. No voicemails. No knock on my apartment door. It was like the air between us had turned into something thick and unbreathable. But strangely, I didn't feel as broken anymore. I felt clearer. Still wounded, but steady. I had gone through every phase: shock, grief, rage, guilt. But now I stood somewhere new: resolve. They had excluded me because they feared my intensity, because I made them uncomfortable, because I was too much. And maybe they weren't entirely wrong. But instead of shrinking to fit their comfort, I decided to confront the truth with empathy. Not ego. Not a confrontation. Not revenge. But a reckoning. For all of us. I grabbed my journal and started planning afterleadus down afterleadus action sieve. What if? Instead of waiting for an apology that might never come, I created a space where the real stuff could surface. No finger pointing. No dramatic declarations. Just truth. Conversation. Healing. I'd call it a family restoration gathering. Okay. Yeah. The name was a little therapist-y, but it had weight. And I was done pretending this was just about a missed party. This was about years of unspoken pain. Patterns passed down like heirlooms. Silent wars. Shaky alliances masked as Sunday dinners. I decided I'd invite everyone. Even the ones who said the worst things in that group chat. Because this wasn't just about me. This was about all of us. I made a list of who to invite Mom and Dad. Of course, Emily. Even though I knew she'd be defensive. Jake. Aunt Laurel. Cousin Iva. Even Uncle Brent. Who never said much but always watched everything. I booked the community room at a local arts center near the lake. Big windows. Natural light. Neutral space. Not Mom's kitchen. Not anyone's territory. I ordered a round table. So no one would be at the head. I bought name tags not to be formal, but to reset how we saw each other. No titles. No roles. Just names. Then, I designed printed cards with one question on each. What part of our family story do you think has gone unspoken for too long? When was the last time you felt misunderstood by someone at this table? What would you say if you knew you wouldn't be interrupted or judged? What kind of family do you wish we were? On the back of each card, I added one reminder. You don't have to fix it. Just feel it. Finally, I wrote each person a letter. Not an accusation. A letter. Here's what I wrote to Emily. Hey Em. I know things between us feel wrecked. I know you probably have walls up a mile high. I'm not here to knock them down. I'm just asking to stand outside them with you for a while. I miss you. Not the idea of you. You? I'm not perfect. I've made moments about me that weren't. I've been a storm when you needed sunshine. But I love you. Fiercely. And I don't want us to keep pretending from a distance when we could be honest in the same room. So I'm asking, will you come? Will you sit at the table? Even if it's uncomfortable, will you try with me * love? Luna. Each letter was different. Tailored. Human. No drama. No guilt trips. Just open hands. I mailed them all. No texts. No DMs. I wanted the invitation to feel real. Intentional. Like it belonged to a world where people still showed up for things that mattered. Then I waited. 2 days later. The first reply came. Jake. Of course. Always the bridge. I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it. Then Aunt Laurel texted, thank you for doing this. We should have had a space like this a long time ago. Then Ivy. Wow. That letter hit me hard. I'm in. Then silence again. 3 more days. Then one evening, just as the sun was bleeding out over the city skyline, I got an email from my dad. Subject, yes. That's all it said. I took a deep breath. That just left 2 people, Mom and Emily. I didn't expect Emily to come. I'd made peace with that. But Mom, I didn't know. Our relationship was complicated. Some days she treated me like her masterpiece. Other days like her biggest mistake. We had never learned how to be soft with each other. The morning of the gathering arrived. I wore a navy blue sweater and jeans neutral. Approachable. I didn't want to look like I was giving a TED talk. I wanted to look like a sister. A daughter. Agnieszka. Just Luna. I brought a vase of sunflowers. Emily always loved sunflowers as a kid. I set the name cards down in a circle. Poured water into glasses. Set the question cards face down, like some sacred ritual. People began to arrive. Jake. Aunt Laurel. Evie. Uncle Brent. Then Dad. He looked older than I remembered. Or maybe just more tired. We exchanged a quiet nod. The clock hit 5:00 p.m. Still no sign of Mom or Emily. I cleared my throat. Let's give it 5 more minutes. We waited in silence. The kind of silence that buzzes with wondering. At 5:04 p.m. the door opened. It was Mom. She stepped in slowly, holding something in her hand, a framed photo of me and Emily, aged 8 and 5, holding ice cream cones, faces covered in chocolate. I wasn't sure I'd come, she said softly. Then behind her, Emily, hair in a messy bun, no makeup, hoodie, eyes red. I'm not here for a fight, she said, but I read your letter. And? I figured I could listen. I smiled. Not because everything was okay, but because everything was finally real. And real, that's where healing starts. They say silence can be louder than any scream. And sitting around that circular table, with 8 of the people who once made up my entire world, I finally understood what that meant. No one reached for the water. No one touched the question cards. Everyone looked at everything except each other. I cleared my throat. Thank you. All of you for showing up. Still. Silence. My palms were sweating. This was my idea. My invitation. My initiative. And now that we were here, I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to lecture. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to make it about me. Even though, in so many ways, it was. So I reached for one of the cards. Flipped it over. Read aloud. What part of our family story do you think has gone unspoken for too long? I looked up. Dad's gaze dropped to his lap. Aunt Laurel let out a quiet breath. Ivy reached for her necklace and started turning the charm over and over in her fingers. No one spoke. Until surprisingly, Uncle Brent cleared his throat. I think, he said slowly, that we've always been better at avoiding than addressing. Heads turned. You mean, Jake said. Like pretending things are fine even when they're not? Exactly. Brent nodded. We keep the peace by ignoring the war. I think we thought that was love. But it wasn't. It was just silence. My chest tightened. That was it. That was the thing no one ever said. That our version of family had always meant politeness over honesty, smiles over truths, holidays over healing. And now it was all spilling out. Mom spoke next. I think I never told Luna how much pressure I felt. Being her mother, she said, her voice trembling. She was always so capable, so driven. I thought I was supposed to keep up, or at least pretend I was. I didn't know how to mother someone like her, so I defaulted to avoidance. I blinked. That wasn't the wound I expected her to name. Emily's turn. She didn't reach for a card. She didn't look at me. I hated how you made me feel small, she said quietly. Even when you weren't trying. Especially when you weren't trying. My gut clenched. You'd correct my stories. You'd organize my stuff without asking. You'd point out when I was being dramatic or emotional as if that was always wrong. I started to believe there was only one right kind of daughter in this family. And it wasn't me. Ouch. But I stayed still. No defending. No justifying. I let her words land like stones on my chest. Because they were her truth. And this table wasn't about being right. It was about being real. I took a breath and said, "I'm sorry. Emily." She finally looked at me. "I didn't mean to dim you." I said, "But I see now how I did be." She didn't say anything back. But her eyes softened. Just a little. And in a room this tense, that felt like a door creaking open, Jake leaned forward. "You know what I think," he said? "We all live in roles. Luna's the achiever. Emily's the heart. I'm the comic relief. Mom's the fixer. Dad's the quiet rock. But maybe we got stuck in those roles so long. We forgot how to see each other." Everyone nodded. Then Ivy flipped a card. "What would you say if you knew you wouldn't be interrupted or judged?" She looked around the table. "I'd say, I miss us. But not the us we pretended to be. I miss the version of us we could have been if we were just a little braver with the truth." There was a long pause after that. Then, Mom reached into her purse and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. "I brought this," she said. "I almost didn't. But then I thought, maybe it's time." She unwrapped a small photo album handmade, with old Polaroids taped to each page. Our messy years. She smiled sadly. The ones before Luna started winning awards, before Emily hit her rebellious streak, before we got too careful with each other. She passed it around. Each person flipped a page, laughed at crooked smiles, jelly-stained shirts, crooked bangs, and holiday disasters. We remembered being human. Together, I finally spoke again. "I didn't bring us here to make anyone feel bad." I said, "I brought us here because I still believe in us. But not the version that hides everything behind 'I'm fine.' I want the real version. The version that admits hurt, says sorry, and stays curious." Dad looked up. For the first time. Directly at me. "I didn't know how to be vulnerable with you," he said. "You were always 10 steps ahead. But that's not your fault. It's mine. And I'm ready to change that." His voice cracked. So did mine. "Me too." "Dad?" No one stood and clapped. No dramatic hugging montage. But something shifted like a storm, passing quietly in the night. The weight of years. Slowly lifting. The final card sat in the center of the table. Emily reached for it. "What kind of family do you wish we were?" She didn't read it aloud. She just held it. Then whispered, "One that doesn't wait until things break to talk about them." I nodded. "That's what this is," I said. "Not a fix. A start." And in that moment, I knew we were still fractured. Still flawed, but we had taken the first honest step toward wholeness. Not because we had all the answers, but because, finally, we were asking the right questions. They say transformation doesn't come all at once. It doesn't march in with trumpets or firecrackers. It creeps in softly like a change in wind, or the first leaf of fall turning gold while the rest are still green. That's what happened after the gathering. No overnight miracles. No instant rewrites of the past. But something had shifted subtle. Quiet. Powerful. For the first time in years. My family wasn't walking on eggshells. There were still silences. Sure. Still awkward pauses. But now, those silences felt more like space, like the air was finally giving us room to breathe. The morning after the gathering, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Hey, Want to grab a coffee today? Just us? I stared at it. It wasn't long. It wasn't emotional. But it was real. And real. I was learning. Is the most generous thing a person can offer after they've hurt you or been hurt by you? We met at a small cafe near the park. One we used to go to as teenagers. Back when we'd split cinnamon rolls and whisper about boys and teachers and what it would feel like to leave home. When I saw her sitting there, hoodie up, no makeup, holding 2 steaming mugs, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because she looked unguarded. I already ordered for you, she said, sliding a chai latte across the table. Still your favorite. Right. I smiled. Yeah. Thanks. There was a beat. I meant what I said at the gathering. She said softly. I know I've been cold. And I know I joined in on things I shouldn't have. I held my breath. I think I was just tired of being compared to you. But I also know you never asked to be the one we all measured ourselves against. That line hit deep. You're right. I said, I didn't ask for it. And honestly, I didn't even realize it was happening. She nodded. I know. We sat in silence for a while, sipping chai, listening to the distant clatter of dishes and the soft hum of conversation around us. Then she looked up. Do you think we'll be okay? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached across the table and tapped her hand gently. We're already better than we were. And that was the truth. Not perfect. Not healed. But better and better. I was learning. Is how bridges are built over the next few weeks. The ripples spread in quiet, unexpected ways. Dad called me just to talk. Not about logistics. Not about problems. Just to talk. I saw a documentary on lunar eclipses. He said, one night, reminded me of how your name means moon. Thought you'd like it. I laughed. I do. He chuckled. Too. I know you're not a kid anymore. But I think I'd like to get to know you as an adult. If that's still an option, I swallowed a lump in my throat. Yeah. Dad. It is. Aunt Laurel sent me a handwritten letter in the mail like it was 1,997. Thank you for doing what none of us were brave enough to do. That day around the table. It cracked something open in me. I've been talking more honestly with Ivy. And even your uncle. You gave us permission to feel again. And then came Mom. Her change was slower. More cautious. She was still Mom, still polishing silverware before dinner parties. Still folding laundry like origami, but she began asking more questions. Real ones. How are you really? Luna, was I too harsh on you when you were little? Do you feel like I see you clearly now? I didn't always have the answers. But she was asking. And that, in itself, was new. Then came something I never saw coming. She invited me over for dinner. Just her and me. The dining room was set perfectly, of course. But in the center of the table was a photo frame I hadn't seen in years, a picture of me at age 12. Sitting on the porch in overalls, dirt on my face, holding a science trophy like it was a gold medal. You always made me proud, she said, as we sat down. I just didn't always know how to say it without sounding like I was pushing you harder. I looked at her. Mom, I said gently. Sometimes, love looks like pressure when it's not named properly. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I want to start naming it better, she whispered. And that was the moment I knew the girl who had once felt like an outsider in her own family had somehow become the one rebuilding it, not by force, not by guilt, but by showing what grace looks like in real time. The final ripple came weeks later. On a Sunday afternoon, we were all back at the lake house, the same place where everything had once imploded. Except this time, it felt different. We grilled hot dogs, played old board games, laughed, told stories. And when someone brought up the past, no one flinched, because we weren't pretending anymore. Emily and I took a walk along the edge of the water, skipping rocks like we used to when we were kids. You know, she said, when you first called that meeting, I thought it was just another one of your perfect planner moments. But it wasn't. It was. The first time I saw you as just my sister. Not the golden girl. Just Luna. I smiled. Just Luna. I repeated. I like that. And maybe that's what healing is. Not erasing what happened. Not forcing people to become different. But choosing again and again to show up anyway. To name the hurt. To sit in the discomfort. To believe in better. Even when you're not guaranteed it. And in doing so, creating ripples that reach farther than you ever imagined. I used to think family was a fixed thing like a photograph frozen in time. You were either in the frame or you weren't. You played your part. Smiled when told. And hoped no one blinked at the wrong moment. But what I've learned is that real family isn't a photo. It's a living thing. Messy. Evolving. Imperfect and sacred. And sometimes, it looks nothing like the picture you once held in your heart. A few months after our gathering, I found myself standing in my tiny apartment kitchen, setting the table for 6. Not blood relatives. Not people I grew up with. But people who had become something else entirely, my chosen family. There was Ryan, my neighbor, who once helped me carry a broken bookcase up 3 flights of stairs in the rain and never let me forget it. Jasmine, the coworker who knew my coffee order by heart and offered me her couch the night I cried in the office parking lot. Overwhelmed and ashamed. Theo, my old college friend who never let distance interrupt connection. Who texted you okay every Sunday morning like it was religion. And 2 others, people I met through grief groups and long walks and shared tears in therapy waiting rooms. People who had also lost things they didn't know how to name until they found someone brave enough to say it out loud. And me, Luna. No longer trying to perform worthiness. No longer hiding behind the title of the strong one. No longer afraid to say, I need you. That night, we didn't have fancy food. It was lasagna from the freezer aisle and garlic bread that almost burned. But we had stories. So many stories. About fathers who left. About mothers who never apologized. About siblings who drifted. About families who taught us to stay quiet, smile big, and never rock the boat. And then, about what came after. About friendships that filled in the gaps. About mentors who showed up at graduations when parents didn't. About found homes and found hearts. We laughed so hard. We cried. We cried so hard. We laughed. And somewhere in the middle of that beautiful chaos, Jasmine raised her glass and said, to the families we build, brick by brick, soul by soul. I looked around. No one shared my last name. No one knew me as the girl with the straight A report cards or the track medals. They only knew this Luna, the one who sometimes cracked, sometimes doubted, but always tried. And they loved her anyway. Later that week, I visited my parents. Yes. We still talked. No. It wasn't always easy. But there was effort now. There was listening. There was change. Mom met me at the door with a hug that lasted a beat longer than usual. Your dad's in the garden, she said. He started planting tomatoes again. Says it reminds him of when you used to help him. That nearly undid me. We sat on the porch, just the three of us, watching the light fade across the backyard. The cicadas sang, the breeze danced. The air felt soft. Remember when I used to think being close meant agreeing on everything Mom said? I chuckled. Yeah. I remember arguing with you about politics at age 12. She smiled. You were relentless. I was trying to matter. I whispered. She reached over and took my hand. You always did. Luna. Even when I didn't say it right. Dad added. We just didn't have the tools to say it better. It wasn't a full repair. But it was honest, and that made it sacred. Later that night, I wrote in my journal, family is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of people willing to work through it with you. I paused, then added, and when those people aren't there, it's okay to build new ones. Love doesn't have to come from history. It can come from intention. 1 week later, I did something I never thought I'd do. I wrote an open letter to my family, not just my biological one, but all the people who had walked with me in the dark and never asked me to shine before I was ready. I read it aloud at a local storytelling night. The final lines. This isn't a story about abandonment. It's a story about return. Not to the way things were, but to something more honest, more human, more whole. The room fell silent when I finished. And then, applause. But more than that, I saw faces soften. I saw tears. I saw people realize they weren't alone. That's the thing about sharing truth. It echoes in the hearts of others who didn't know how to name theirs. Now, when people ask me about my family, I say I have two. One by birth, one by choice. Both taught me something precious. And when they ask what I've learned, I tell them, you can grieve what you lost and still love what remains. You can set boundaries and still offer forgiveness. You can walk away and still look back with grace. And sometimes, the people who break your heart are also the ones willing to help you sew it back together if you let them. But if they aren't, you can build. You can begin again. You can gather your people from the ashes of what you thought family had to be, because sometimes, the family you build yourself is the most beautiful proof that you were never broken. Just becoming. Forgiveness is one of those words people love to toss around like confetti, especially when they're not the ones bleeding. Just let it go. Time heals all wounds. You'll feel better once you forgive. But the truth, forgiveness isn't a finish line. It's a wilderness. And for me, that wilderness was long, messy, and filled with shadows I didn't know I still carried. After the family dinner, after the healing began and the air felt less heavy, I expected to feel lighter, freer, whole. Instead, I felt hollow. Because while people had apologized, while moments of honesty were shared, there was still a small voice inside me whispering, but what about all those years, the birthdays missed, the milestones downplayed, the pain of being invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to love you loudly? Forgiveness. I realized I wasn't going to come just because the others were finally ready. It would have to come from me. And that made me furious. Why should I have to do more work? Why should I be the one to let go of the weight they put on my shoulders? But the more I sat with those questions, the more I realized forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about me. I started small. I wrote letters I never sent. One to my mom. One to Emily. One to myself at age 15. I poured every ounce of rage and sorrow into those pages. I let the ink carry the ache. And then I burned them. It wasn't symbolic at first. It was just practical. I didn't want to keep them around. But as the papers curled and blackened, something inside me began to loosen. There was no dramatic release. No movie moment. Just smoke. and a strange, unexpected quiet. One afternoon, I found myself walking through the park where my parents used to take us when we were little. I sat on the same bench where my dad taught me to tie my shoes. I closed my eyes and asked myself a question I'd been avoiding for years. What if they really did love me and just didn't know how to show it, not to excuse, not to minimize, but to understand? Because that's what forgiveness really is. Not forgetting, not pretending, but understanding. In that moment, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. I was 7, sick with the flu. My mom stayed up all night cooling my forehead and reading me Charlotte's Web for the 5th time in a row. And my dad, he made toast, cut into tiny hearts, because he knew I wouldn't eat otherwise. They didn't always show love the right way, but maybe they never stopped trying. Maybe I just stopped noticing when the love didn't look like the kind I wanted. I decided to do something bold, something my therapist called an emotional risk. I invited each family member to meet me one-on-one, not to revisit the pain, not to rehash every wound, but to tell them something simple: I forgive you. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I don't want to carry it anymore. The first person I told was my dad. We sat in his garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects. He was polishing an old lamp, hands covered in dust. When I said the words, he paused. "You do?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "I do." His eyes glistened. He nodded once, then twice. "I didn't know how bad I hurt you," he said, "but I knew I did. Every day." I reached for his hand. "I know now that you loved me even when you didn't know how to say it." And in that small space, between silence and sawdust, we found something resembling peace. One by one, I repeated this act with my mom, with Emily, even with myself in the mirror. Each time, the anger melted a little more. Each time, the bitterness gave way to breath. And slowly, I stopped being the girl defined by what she didn't receive. I became the woman defined by what she chose to release. People think forgiveness is about saying it. But here's what it really looks like. It's not interrupting when someone brings up your past hurt, even when you want to scream. It's smiling at a memory that used to make you cry. It's letting go of the version of yourself that always needed to be right and embracing the version that simply wants to be free. Months later, I was driving home from work when a song came on the radio, an old one my mom used to sing while cooking. I rolled down the window, let the air hit my face, and laughed. Not because everything was perfect, but because I realized something powerful. I had survived the ache. And even more than that, I had turned it into art, into healing, into choice. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a one-time event. It's a habit, a daily decision to unclench your fists and choose softness instead. It's the bravest, most loving rebellion a person can make. Not just for others, but for themselves. My name is Luna. And if you've made it this far, maybe you've walked through some version of my story. 2. Maybe you've been left out. Maybe you've carried wounds wrapped in silence. Maybe you've sat in a room full of people and still felt completely alone. If that's you, hear this: you are not alone. And you never were. I used to think healing looked like everything going back to the way it was. I used to crave that fantasy. The family dinner, the inside jokes, the ease. But what I've come to realize is, healing doesn't take you backward. It takes you forward into something more honest, more human, more whole. Healing isn't about pretending the pain never happened. It's about choosing who you want to be now that it did. One of the most profound moments of this journey came during a community storytelling night in Portland. I had been invited to share my why I chose forgiveness, Why I chose to stay in connection. Why I chose to rebuild instead of run. I stood on stage, trembling, not because I was afraid of speaking, but because I knew I wasn't just telling my story, I was telling theirs. 2. I looked out over a sea of strangers and began. Once, I was the daughter who wasn't invited. Now, I am the woman who builds the table. Silence. Stillness. Then, a single from the back. And just like that, I felt it, the invisible thread pulling us all together. We all carry something, don't we? The sibling who betrayed us, the parent who didn't show up, the partner who walked away, the version of ourselves we had to leave behind to survive. And yet, here we are, still standing, still loving, still choosing softness in a world that taught us to armor up. The biggest lesson I've learned through it all, that love and truth are not opposites. They are companions. You can love someone and still name how they hurt you. You can speak your truth without setting fire to the bridge. And sometimes, telling the truth is the way you love them best. My relationship with my family isn't perfect. There are still awkward moments, still hesitations, still ghosts of old patterns waiting to creep in through the back door. But now we catch them. Together. Now, we pause when the air shifts. We ask questions instead of making assumptions. We say things like, "That hurt," and "I hear you," and "Let's try again." We're not performing anymore. We're present. And that is everything. To anyone listening, wondering if their pain is too old, too deep, too complicated to heal, I offer you this. It is never too late to begin again. Not because the past can be rewritten, but because you can. You get to choose what kind of person you become in response to the pain. You get to decide what kind of love you offer yourself now. And you are worthy of love that doesn't require you to shrink, hide, or hustle for belonging. If I could go back and whisper something to my younger self, the girl who stood outside her sister's party, heart pounding and eyes brimming with tears, I'd say, this isn't the end. It's the beginning. One day, this ache will be your anthem. One day, you'll help others feel seen through the very story that once made you feel invisible. The truth is, we don't heal in isolation. We heal in story. In brave conversations. In small tables filled with lasagna and laughter. In the quiet decision to reach back towards someone who once let you fall. So here's what I leave you with, my final lesson. Speak your truth. Even when your voice trembles, forgive. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. Grieve what was, but don't miss what can be. Find your people, the ones who see you. Not just for what you survived, but for who you are becoming. And most of all, keep your heart open, even if it's been broken, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay soft. My name is Luna. I was once unseen, unheard, and uninvited. But now, I am the narrator of my own story. And I hope, somewhere in the cracks of this story, you find a mirror for your own courage. 2.